If you're wondering how to win more games on the most popular Age of Empires 2 multiplayer map Arabia, then you've come to the right place, because we will talk about how the map is set up, which strategies and build orders to play on it, and most importantly which civ to pick to push that elo through the roof. So let's go! You might be wondering why we're starting this new map guide series with Arabia. Well, the answer is super simple. Arabia is by far the most popular Age of Empires 2 map, with 49% of ranked 1v1 games happening here, and most pros routinely play this map, making it super well known in the community and the go-to for climbing the ladder. Let's start by taking a look at the map overview. With Arabia, broadly speaking, you get two types of map generations since the April 25 patch. In one of them you get deer as herdables, as has always been the case, and in the other one you get chicken, which can only be pushed via very quirky mechanics. Other than that, this map is incredibly predictable in its generation and distribution of resources. You'll always start with at least one sheep already discovered, and another 3 in your starting vision right next to it. Beyond that, you get 2 boars, rhinos or elephants, as well as 2 groups of 2 sheep, turkeys, pigs or goats, and finally 6 berry bushes close to your TC. As for minerals, you have a 7-tile so-called main gold in the direct area of your town center, and 2 more 4-tile golds further away, as well as a 5-tile stone and a 4-tile stone in your direct vicinity. Wood generally is not a problem either. You will find 2 to 4 wood lines close to your TC and in the first few seconds of scouting, and they somewhat protect your base. In terms of the rest of the map, you'll find 2 so-called neutral golds and stones distributed across the map, which usually get more interesting towards the castle and imperial age phase of the game. On 1v1 Arabia, you also get 5 relics that are fairly evenly distributed across the map to boost your long-term gold income. With the basics out of the way, let's talk about 3 quirks of this map, meaning things that you have to pay attention to if you want to win Arabia. The first thing to look out for is whether your minerals, berries and potentially chickens spawn towards the edge of the map or towards the center of the map. If your key resources are forward, you almost have to play an aggressive game, whereas if they are safe behind the TC or covered by a wood line, you can be a bit more greedy, prioritize economy over military in the early game. Quirk number 2 is hills on this map. Remember that any unit hitting another unit that is below them deals extra damage to the other unit, while themselves receiving less damage from the enemy unit that is below them. So a double whammy of an effect, and the same goes for buildings, by the way, which is why you often see castles placed on hills. On Arabia, you will see that oftentimes your base is even surrounded by a ring of hills, which means the attacker has the advantage. As we'll talk about later, Arabia is an inherently aggressive map, and this is just another feature feeding into that. The one hill you really want to look out for is a big one between you and your opponent. It doesn't always exist, but it often does on Arabia, and in Castle Age you want to start thinking about controlling that hill and being the first one to place your castle on that hill. The last thing, or the last quirk, that you want to pay attention to on Arabia is vision. Of course, scouting is always important on any map, but particularly on Arabia. And that's because this map is entirely accessible, which means units, TCs, production buildings could be anywhere on this map. This matters in Feudal Age, obviously, when you're tracking the enemy army, super important when you're playing a slow unit, by the way. You do not want to be out of position with your archers and then spend a full in-game minute to go back to your base. And even later in the game it's very important, as we'll see, to track if your opponent is expanding their economy or production elsewhere on the map. On to strategies and build orders. You have already heard it by now, Arabia is a very open and therefore aggressive map. Very little is stopping your opponent from inflicting real damage as early as late Dark Age or early Feudal Age, so that's when you should expect the action to start in most games. Build orders like a fast castle, let alone a fast imperial, are very hard to pull off here unless you have a really defensive map, but in 80% of Arabia it dictates that you play a fast feudal, meaning you get to Feudal Age as fast as you reasonably can to immediately produce Feudal Age units to either defend against your opponent or to be the one on the front foot and start disrupting their economy and building placements. Other options, of course, are the Drush or the Man-at-Arms Rush, as well as the Tower Rush. Pretty much anything that deals damage early on. Let's say you've had a bit of a back and forth with your opponent in Feudal Age and are wondering on when to click up to Castle Age. Well, that's pretty easy on Arabia. There are 2 rules of thumb here. Rules of thumb? Rule of thumbs? If you're the one attacking and doing all the damage, stop producing units when you can't inflict any more damage, for example because your opponent is fully walled, built a tower, or simply has too many defensive units in place. If Feudal Age fighting is balanced or you're the one defending, then stop producing units if you are fully walled and think your economy can survive into Castle Age without taking major damage. Either way, you should aim to be walled by the end of Feudal Age to prevent raids. The map is super open, so raids can come from any direction and at any stage of the game. Arabia's Castle Age is then all about getting map control, capturing those precious hills, and having full scouting information of your opponent's strategy. Towards the end of Castle Age, you'll usually see castles going up on those hills, at which point both players need bombard cannons or trebs to take them out, which is your cue to save up for Imperial Age, unless you're playing an all-in Castle Age push with plenty of siege or other building-breaking units. One thing to remember as you go to Imperial Age is to try and avoid unnecessary fights. Pro tip, if your opponent suddenly stops fighting or avoids fights in late Castle Age, this can be a sign that they are on their way to Imperial Age and waiting for those upgrades to kick in. In Imperial Age, there are 5 things I like to focus on for Arabia, and we start with the Treb War. Your castle needs to be built and resources ready in the bank to start producing trebs the second we hit Imperial Age. This is the main instant advantage you get from earlier Imperial Age time. And taking out the enemy castle is often the first step to winning the game. Keep in mind that unless you get chemistry for free with the Turks or 1 age earlier with the Bohemians, it takes much longer and more resources to get the first bombard cannon out in the field, so trebs really have an early imp advantage there. Next up is your expansion. Your starting minerals will begin to run out, so you need to expand on the map with further castles and TCs to secure resources. The same will be true for your woodlines at some point. Next up is vision. If we spot our enemy's expansion attempts to secure those neutral golds, for example, we can intercept them with our mobile units and really cause disruption to their gold income. So make sure you place a few outposts or keep scouting the map constantly with your units. Number 4 is raiding. As woodlines get overchopped, the enemy base will start to have holes everywhere, which gives us the opportunity for raiding with cheap but mobile units such as hussars. And the final thing to focus on is a bit of an obvious one, and it's your final unit composition. I think every civ has about 1 to 3 final unit compositions that maximize their civ bonuses and abilities, and that's what you should transition towards, which means the correct eco setup, the correct production buildings en masse, and units and tech, of course. Now that we've talked about the strategy to win the game, the obvious question becomes which civ is best at executing that strategy on Arabia. Let's look at 3 factors. And the first one is units. I've said it already before, for most elo ranges, having a civ with mobile options is a big advantage. So we're looking at the usual suspects here of Mongols, Franks, Persians, Magyars, Khitans, and looking at the stats we can see the same, with almost all of them having a win rate of above 50% and being picked most of the time. And it's not just about mobility in Feudal Age. Knights in Early Castle Age remain the strongest unit in the game. They can take out most other units, and as soon as you have roughly 12 to 15, depending on upgrades, you can even take out fully garrisoned TCs. Of course, an early game archer composition can also win the game, but it does take more player skill, and it's higher risk of them being out of position or being hit by that one nasty mangonel shot. The second thing to think about is economy tech and unit bonuses. On an open, fast-paced map such as Arabia, you would want your economy benefits to hit very early in the game. And that's what makes Mongols such a strong pick, with hunters working 40% faster, scouts get additional line of sight, and then in Castle Age you get additional HP on light horsemen. Another civ that fits the bill here are Ethiopians. They have a super strong Feudal Age archer opening. They do get 100 gold and food when advancing to the next age. Their foot archers attack 18% faster, and the pikeman upgrade in Castle Age is free, and you can get incredibly much vision since outposts are free and have +3 line of sight. And civ number 3 with cool early game tech to mention that I find a little underrated sometimes are the Celts. Their lumberjacks work 15% faster, they get faster moving infantry, very nice for a man-at-arms rush, and once you hit Castle Age, their infantry and siege push is nearly unstoppable. There are of course many more civs with cool early game bonuses, and we can't mention them all here. What I'm trying to do is sharpen your eyes on what to look for. And with that, let's move on to the last ingredient for the top 3 Arabia civs, and that is timing. On open land maps, you want a civilization that peaks early, and by peak we mean when this civ is the strongest throughout the game relative to all other civs. You can find some really cool stats on win rates by time per civilization on this website called AoEstats.io. I'll put the link in the description for you to check out. Just to add to our list, there are some civs with great early game win rates. The first one here are the Shu. Thanks to their lumberjack's ability to generate food passively, they're cheaper upgrades for archers and additional line of sight for archers. Another one to mention are the Khitans. They have a whole host of early unit bonuses that affect both a man-at-arms rush and Feudal Age units, which is very helpful for our strategy. And lastly, there are a few infantry civs that peak very early in the game, such as the Goths, the Bulgarians, or the Malians, with very nice early bonuses for their infantry push. Now, where does all of that leave us with regards to picking the best civ for playing Arabia? Here is my personal top 3 recommendation, and before you say it, of course you can win Arabia with other civs, but I think the following 3 are the best across the majority of skill levels and combine all 3 ingredients that we talked about. Let's start with place number 3, and those are the Persians. You do start with additional 50 wood and 50 food, and your TC works 5% faster already in Dark Age and even faster as you progress through the ages. This allows you to reach Feudal Age much faster and gets you off to a strong economy start, and they have a full tech tree for cavalry with bloodlines for scouts. And as far as the late game is concerned, they even get to the paladin equivalent of Savar, the Knightline gets +2 attack against ranged soldiers, and they can get to hand cannoneers, and they can replace the gold cost on crossbows with wood. That is pretty cool, and a worthy number 3 on the list here. Moving on, place number 2 are the Khitans. I mean, they have it all. A massive economy bonus thanks to their pastures, they can bring on a mean man-at-arms rush since attack upgrades are doubled in effect, and they get +2 versus ranged units, and then in Feudal Age they can produce trash units, including scouts, 25% faster, which is huge. And even if the game gets to Castle Age, you have some cool options, including cavalry archers, step lancers, fire lancers, and more. And now moving on to place number 1, and I'm so sorry, I know it's the boring and obvious choice, but there is no way around them, it has to be the Mongols. An absolute killer in getting to Feudal Age quickly, thanks to the hunters working faster, and then you have fully upgradable scouts with +2 line of sight, and for Castle Age you get additional nice upgrades for horsemen with +20% HP, and you have the option to go step lancers or cavalry archers or even foot archers if you want to. It's such a versatile set of options and a super mobile civilization which just helps a ton on Arabia. And hey, if you can get to Mangadai, I mean, the game is yours. Lastly, I know that many of you out there much prefer playing team games over 1v1s, so let's quickly talk about this. Just like in a 1v1, usually you end up having huge Feudal Age fights, but on an even bigger scale. The classic combination here is that one player goes archers and the other one goes scouts, and then it's just all about picking fights together, and if possible at the opponent's base. There is nothing worse than your archers getting picked off by the enemy scouts while your teammate is off fighting somewhere else alone on the map, and this principle remains true throughout the match. If you're playing 3v3 or 4v4, that means you'll have pockets and flanks. Now, while on closed maps like Black Forest, really the pockets can just boom with next to no risk of being attacked. The same is not true for Arabia. Nevertheless, the way to reach the pocket is of course longer than for your flanks, making them less exposed generally speaking, so something like a fast castle into mobile units does make sense for the pocket player to help out your flanks with strong Castle Age units quickly. The flanks, on the other hand, can play slightly less mobile compositions with early game bonuses to try and pressure the enemy flank more quickly. And that's it, all the knowledge you need to climb the ladder on the most popular competitive Age of Empires 2 multiplayer map, Arabia. And as always, I'm super curious to hear what you think about the strategies and civs I mentioned, which ones you like to use, and of course how you get on with your Arabia grind. Until then, I wish you good luck and I see you for the next one.